Alright, engineers. So in this video, we're going to be taking a look at kind of the ship as a whole and exploring a few key details about it. So I want to start with a quick rundown of all the different connections that we have here, because you guys have done this for just the greenhouse and just focused on the Thanksgiving meal as we did last week. So let's go ahead and look at all the connections that we can make here. We're going to do this a little bit differently. It's not going to be focused on which individual section we're looking at. Instead, we're going to be looking at specific inputs and outputs. So let's start with oxygen. So oxygen is produced by the greenhouse and it's used in the solid waste facility as part of like chemical processes. It's used in the oxygen section. It's also used by the animals in the barnyard. Oh, and before we go too much further, this is a slightly different breakdown than the way that I split it up for you. In this one, we have a separate water facility and a solid waste facility, as opposed to just the general waste processor that we have on our ships. Just a slightly different way of organizing it. Alright, so focusing on oxygen. Well, oxygen comes out of the greenhouse and then it has to get split up and sent out to the waste facility. It's going to get breathed in by the crew, and it's also going to be breathed in by the animals in the barnyard. So there's our oxygen connection. And after those animals and people breathe it in, they're going to produce CO2, which then has to get sent over to the greenhouse to get broken down and photosynthesized into oxygen once again. So that's gases. Now let's look at water. So the crew, the greenhouse, and the barnyard, they're all going to produce some amount of just dirty water. This is something that I called gray water before. And it's also the stuff that gets breathed out, because you may not know this, but one way that you lose water is just by exhaling. So that water vapor needs to get collected, as well as all of the dirty water, so the urine from the people and the animals, that also needs to be sent to the water facility. So now let's move on to food, which is produced by the greenhouse and the barnyard, and that is going to be used to feed the crew, and some of that is also going to be used to feed the animals. After you eat that food, nature takes its course and you have to expel feces. Those have to get sent over to the solid waste facility. There's also going to be some amount of non-food material produced by the animals and the plants. So this would be things like corn stalks, probably things like bones and fur. Those have to get sent over to the solid waste facility to get processed. Once all of that stuff gets processed, it turns into compost, which we can use to fertilize the plants. And then water. Everybody on this ship needs water. So from the water facility, we'll be sending out pure water to the crew, to the animals, and to the plants. If you put it all together, you can see everything on the ship is really tightly interconnected. This is what it takes in order to, keep everybody and everything on that ship alive and functioning. And you can see if any one section was to break down, it would be catastrophic for the whole ship. Alright, so speaking of catastrophe, we're going to take a look at some problems in this report. So this is going to be the real meat of this assignment. So in this, there's a series of situations, and I want you guys to try and think about them and just do your best to give a response to this. For most of these, there's not any one right answer. I really want to see what you're thinking about. So let's take a look at the first one. So in this first situation, our waste processor is breaking down. And remember, the waste processor takes in the dirty water, the feces, the non-edible plants, and the dirty water, and it's going to convert those into clean water, into fertilizer, and into compost. And these are all directly paired. So the dirty water and the captured water gets turned into clean water, the feces turns into fertilizer, and the non-edible plants turn into compost. And because this waste processor is having issues, it's only acting at 2/3 capacity. So that means that instead of processing 900 gallons of water, 90 pounds of fertilizer, and 270 pounds of compost, it's only going to be able to do 2/3 of that. The captain has come to you to see what they should do. First three choices are, if we're only acting at 2/3 capacity, let's only do 2/3 of the things. So option 1 is to not produce any water and only work on the fertilizer and compost. Option 2, don't produce any fertilizer and only keep the water and the compost. Option 3, don't produce any compost, only produce the water and fertilizer. And option 4, reduce all of them by 1/3. So go down to 600 gallons of water, 60 pounds of fertilizer, and 180 pounds of compost. Now, the one thing that you have to keep track of is that if the waste processor stops producing one output, then that input is going to start to build up. So for example, if you don't produce compost, you're going to be letting non-edible plants pile up for a week. So what I want you guys to try and figure out is which option is the best option here, and why is that the best option? Pick one of these 4 options and give me one paragraph, so that means 3 to 5 full sentences explaining why that's the best option. Try and think about any of the other side effects that you might run into for this issue. You know, which of these inputs is going to be the biggest problem if it piles up? Which of these outputs do we need the most? And how do we balance all of that out? Alright, so that's issue number 1. Issue number 2, sabotage. So the captain suspects that there's an imposter among us when some systems start giving unusual measurements. They find out that one crewmate is having a little bit of a panic attack. They started filling up containers like jugs of water and hiding them. They, for whatever reason, started thinking that they might be running out of water. The captain isn't really sure that this is a problem, because he thinks, well, if the water was on the ship, we still have the same amount of water, and he's not sure why the other systems are giving unusual measurements because of this. So it's your job to explain to the captain why hiding the water like this is a problem. Now this one again, I'm looking for thinking, I'm looking for reasoning. Why do you think, based on what we just saw with all the connections, it might be a problem to put away 100 gallons of water like this? What do you think is going to happen if that water is not part of the system, not part of those connections? For this one, it's a little bit more straightforward. I'm just looking for 2 to 3 complete sentences. And last, we want to think about priorities. So we've had 2 big issues, and the captain wants to be able to kind of protect all the systems so that we don't have any chances of sabotage, like the crew member hiding the water, and we want to avoid accidents and breakdowns. So he wants to put in some security systems, but he needs your help to decide which one is the most important. So which system should we protect first? So I want you guys to pick between the greenhouse, the livestock, the crew quarters, and the waste processor. Which of those systems is the most important and should get protected first? Just pick one and give me your best reasoning for why that's the most important. Not necessarily a perfect answer here. I just want to see what you guys are thinking and how you guys can back it up. So answer this in a paragraph, which means 3 to 5 complete sentences, please. This assignment is a little bit different than our previous ones. There's no drawing, there's no numbers. I just want to really get you guys thinking critically, thinking like engineers. And the biggest takeaway from this is that in engineering, sometimes there's no perfect answer. We're just working on getting to the best balance that we can and making sure that we have a good reason for our choices. So good luck with this one. Feel free to email me if you have any issues along the way. I hope you guys have a little bit of fun with this one. This is going to be one of the last assignments in our Spaceship series here.